So I guess I'm going to take over because now I'm going to be presenting live from a couch in my bedroom, which is just so weird. But it works so well with our current life and times, and actually my presentation. So that's fine. I before I get into my presentation, I just want to give a huge thank you to everybody who presented today, to everybody who has stopped by today to watch some of these sessions. I just am really blown away by just every session I've seen has been amazing. And for me, it's only 12:45 in the afternoon. And I'm thinking to myself, I love this idea of like breakfast, early morning professional development session or early morning class. It's just so great. So thank you so much, everyone. I am probably going to get started on my session in just a minute. Amy, is there anything that you want to mention housekeeping wise?
No, but once again, super thank you, and thanks for everyone who's been sticking with us. I know it's been kind of a long day, and some of you guys like Fee and Joe, and you guys have been on since early afternoon for you and early morning for us. So we really appreciate all the participation, and I had a lot of fun, and I just learned so much. So one last plug, I will just put one last plug again. If you can and want to donate to any of the charities that we put up on the website or a local food bank, shoot me a note. I will match your donation. And just thank you again.
Hurrah! Okay, I guess I'm going to share my screen now. So yeah, wow, I feel like this is a good one to end on. I hope that is the case. This is actually a presentation that I created a few weeks ago, and I feel like even since I made it, it's a little out of date, which is crazy because you just wouldn't think that with everything that's going on. But things are changing so quickly. So first of all, as I said, I want to just say welcome and thank you so much for attending. Oh, Amy, if you're on, we might enable breakout rooms for this for like, I mean, I don't know how many people are really here and not here. So, I mean, maybe not. Maybe we'll just keep it open and we'll just take comments from people here, but there will be like there's a little bit of participation coming up. But welcome and thank you so much for attending. I thought I would start with this slide. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen these memes going around like me 2020, but like I just keep thinking back to like New Year's Eve, 1st of January, early January. I feel like I was very much the image on the left, as some people who know me know that I am just like an incurable optimist all the time, positivity. And I just was like, oh, this year is going to be great. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to do so much cool stuff. And now I feel like, whoa, all right. All right. Okay. So much that I did not expect has happened. And I'm just wondering, I mean, especially too, like, as I said, I gave this presentation a few weeks ago, but especially I feel like this week, for those of us who've been in the United States, it's been a really intense week. And I feel like a lot of us might be feeling a little bit battered at this moment. We've dealt with so much in such a short time. But I'm just assuming some of you can relate to this feeling. But I just was thinking about the ways in which our world has changed, okay? I mean, the ways in which we interact with our colleagues and our friends have kind of changed. We used to be able to see people we work with at the office or in the classroom or in the staff room or out for dinner or for drinks. But I know that some of that is coming back now, but most of us have been in our homes and our interactions with other people have been really limited. Also, another thing that's changed is our feelings of security, both with our jobs, our lives. By the way, I can't see the chat box at all. So, if you're chatting there, Amy, I would like to ask you, feel free to jump in if there's any important chat you see in the chat. But I think a number of us felt pretty secure in our jobs, and then all of this happened and it completely turned everything upside down. I mean, just yesterday I heard about some people who got furloughed. I know other people who lost their jobs immediately. I know other people who don't know how long they're going to have a job. Not everybody is in that situation, of course, but so many of our colleagues are. And so many people that we know, and some people have been just kind of put, like they're technically still working, but they don't have hours, and they don't know when they're going to have hours. There's a lot of uncertainty. Then there's also the tasks and demands on our time in a typical day. I was speaking to another colleague who said that she thinks some people right now are unemployed, of course. Then there are other people who are underemployed. And then there's a third group of people who are actually now doing several jobs. So if people were cut from their company or wherever they were working, now they're doing work that they thought they had moved on from in some cases. Like, I've been promoted and I don't do that anymore. Oh, wait, now I do. So, and also there's the fact that some people have kids at home, so they're not only managing what could be quite a demanding schedule, but also taking care of their children and helping them do online stuff. And I feel like this is coming back a little bit, but what the line is between a weekday and a weekend and a work day and a holiday, I think has really blurred for a lot of us because we're working from home. Now, for me, I felt like my schedule was weird before, but it's even weirder. I mean, Amy and I were having a chat maybe about a month ago, and I mentioned that like I'd worked every single day for like 6 weeks, not 8 hours, but definitely at least for part of each day. And she suggested, why don't you take some time off? And I said, well, I would like to, if I do that, I'd like to like leave and get away from things, and that's not happening. So, what is a holiday anyway? And then finally, there's our own health. Obviously, our physical health, people have been impacted by COVID-19. Maybe they've gotten sick. Maybe they know people who have died. I know several people. I don't know anyone personally, but I definitely know of people, and we're all coping with that right now and the risks that we might be affected. So our world from January to now has changed just so much. Hold on. But we've also had some triumphs, I think. I think a lot of people, and I know some of the people who are here were already working online. I myself, I was doing kind of like 50% because I'm working with Bounce English, and then I'm also working at USC. But we transitioned so fast in many cases from doing classes face-to-face to an online format. I know one school that did it in like 2 days. I don't actually even really know how that's possible, to be honest. And it wasn't perfect, when you do it in 2 days, but they did it. And a lot of times it was just a few people making the bulk of those changes. And we've done that while navigating through incredible stress and uncertainty. And we have made it to this point. So if you're here listening to me right now, just like high five yourself, like, hooray, you're here today. That's amazing. We've gone through a lot. I don't know about you, but I've had some sleepless nights over all of this, and we're still here. So survive and thrive, baby. That's what I say. So how about you? I would like to turn it over to you guys right now just for a minute and find out what have been some of your biggest challenges and where are you now? Feel free to jump in and offer your thoughts. Hello.
I'm here. We transitioned overnight. We got a phone call in the middle of the night saying that somebody in the building was infected. And we're in the center of Manhattan, so we had to transition up overnight. And I think we're just coming out of that emergency session into what now?
Yeah.
And I will say that I thought I was doing very, very well until the recent protests, and that the inability to join the protests because of health concerns, I feel that I'm letting people down. You know, it's a tough one because obviously I'm not, because me getting sick, I'm high risk. So, but this week has seemed infinitely tougher than any of the other weeks, even through the height of it. And I was just reading earlier on today that we're in for, you know, somebody was saying that we're in for a second wave, and actually somebody else said we haven't come out of the first. So I'm in that headspace.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that you feel guilty, or I think you said feel good, like you feel like you said you feel like you should. That's me. That's my Catholic school guilt complex. But you feel like you should be doing more. I think a lot of us, because we work in the field that we do, we really care a lot about helping people, and so we want to do those things. And then you wonder, like, am I doing, is there something, I go through this, I will say what runs through my mind almost like on a daily basis is like, isn't there something I could be doing right now? Like, isn't there something else I could be adding to what I'm doing? So I think that's a really common feeling. And also, just touching on this week, I actually think for those of us who've been in the US, this has been a really painful week. Because even though, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, there's a lot of chaos, I am cautiously optimistic, as a friend of mine said last night, that things will change for the better. But I think this brings up a lot of pain about our country, on top of a lot of pain and stress that everybody has already been going through for several months. Does anyone else want to share anything?
Well, just kind of touching on that point, I'm originally from the US, but I'm over here in Ireland, and it's actually been quite difficult to be here, because you feel like you should be in the US right now. Sorry, I didn't think I was going to get emotional about it.
It's okay. I know that feeling so well. I've been there, Jessica. I've totally been in that situation.
And just the pandemic has been really difficult. It feels like you, at least in my situation, I'm looking at entering the job market. The school I work for in Kerry is a summer school for teenagers. So overnight we've shut. It's a family-owned business. We don't know if we're ever going to open again. Hopefully we will. It's just it's been one hit after another, and you feel like you recover, and then something else happens, and then you recover, and then something else happens. So it's definitely been trying, and being abroad, specifically in the past week and two, has been quite difficult, because it's that feeling of I'm not there, I can't do anything, I'm not doing enough. What can I do?
I really have been there, because I've been abroad when other things, like I remember when Hurricane Katrina hit, I was in the UK and just watching everything that was happening in New Orleans. And I'm not from New Orleans, but I had been to New Orleans many, many, many times. And so watching that from afar was really, really hard and really heartbreaking. So I really understand that feeling. Does anyone else want to share anything? Yeah, Anne, go for it.
Just jump in. And I mean, one of the things that I've been reflecting on this week is how the current events are certainly bringing to light and exposing very explicitly the systemic racism and injustice in our police conduct and our criminal justice system in that area. But as educators, we have to do a lot more. I think we're ahead of other systems as far as taking an anti-racist stance or, you know, diversity, pro-diversity kind of positions. But obviously, you know, our educational systems have a lot of changes that need to be made too. So we have a huge task ahead of us, and that's overwhelming and completely understandable that, you know, it brings up all these emotions too. So thank you, Jessica, for being vulnerable. It's really nice.
I agree. Go for it, Jude.
Yeah, both the comments there. I think with the, you know, the one thing with getting emotional there, Jessica, I think that's also an issue in education that we talk about in this social justice project about, you know, not showing emotion in the classroom and not, you know, that's kind of a bit of an issue as well, that's kind of taken out of it. The education system, I mean, I think higher education has many places, I know here, and I know everybody's trying to do their best, but still we can be critical of the system, and we can be critical of those who are running the system as really in some ways shown a bit of its true colours. You know, the very lack of, I think well-being messages came far later than carry on assessing and carry on teaching, and, you know, and then the well-being started, and it was kind of like, okay, that's really a bit of true colours there, and that students had to put together a petition to ask for different options on, because they can't complete assessments because they're, who knows what where they are, what their situation is, but they had to actually put a petition together to ask for different options. That had to come from them, and even then the option, there isn't an option of not doing it. You know, an equity way would say, okay, everybody just gets through to the second year, gets through to the first year. What harm would that really do, really? And instead those students who have struggled and are under pressure are now going to be coming back to start a new term and have all the assessments to catch up on. So it's, yeah, I think it's really kind of shown its true colours, and we need to keep voicing that and standing up against that. So yeah, just really mixed feelings really. I'm having days, if I'm honest, of like complete loving, because I'm in a privileged situation of my slippers and being at home and just kind of, you know, working from home. I never worked from home before. And then, yeah, days of real frustration, and so a real roller coaster in some ways, but wanting to kind of, you know, continue voicing the inequalities that surrounds especially our education.
And I think as well we can all really relate to the helplessness at the moment, and especially, like, you know, watching the protests on TV and stuff, and for whatever reasons not being able to participate and feeling far away. And it's definitely something I think that a lot of people can relate to.
I think as well is that we can't ask our students to get emotional about stuff if we're not prepared to do it ourselves. Yeah, that's a false equivalency. If we need to show that we're vulnerable to this, that it affects us, because otherwise we're just asking them to look at something theoretically, and that's not going to change anything.
And that's not really reality either. Like, it's just not reality. Like, you experience things with your whole being, like your intellect, your emotions. That's the whole thing. I'm going to move us on in a minute, but there's just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. One is, you know, it's interesting that this is, you know, I'm thinking back to Julie and Emma, your session earlier, talking about subjects that we avoid. I actually heard of a school administrator this week suggesting that we don't bring up to the students the unrest in the United States right now. Like, we just don't mention it in case that upsets them, but they're living it. How can you do that? And the other thing I wanted to say was, there's a really good podcast about staying at home. It's called Staying In with Emily and Camille. I can't remember Camille's last name, but he's the actor who was in The Big Sick, and he also
and Johnny.
Yeah, that's it. But he said, like, he's not only having good and bad days, he's almost having like good and bad days within the same day. And I really related to that. I think a lot of us have had moments like that. So I feel like we're all doing what we can. I would like to ask you to mute yourself if you can for the moment, but I feel like we're all doing what we can right now, and that is okay. You know, like some days, especially those of us who are still teaching, or maybe who are not teaching and are trying to fill our days and then are saying, okay, what should I be doing with myself now? Whatever, I really feel like this is a really tumultuous time, and honestly, whatever you're getting done in a day or not getting done is really fine, because we're all just kind of doing what we can, and that's fine. This I have shared before, and I think maybe even Caroline, you might have given this to me or shared it. I don't remember, but I think this is a really great quote, and I do really think it applies to everything that's still going on right now in terms of the protests in the United States, that we're actually all living through a trauma right now. This is a traumatic experience that we have gone through. And as a result, we're just trying to survive it. Okay, so if you have moments where you are feeling incredibly anxious, or you feel like you're not really feeling anything, or you're feeling depressed, or even like I have to fill every minute of the day, this is all very normal. These are all really normal reactions to trauma. And that is a lot of what this talk is about. Now, I know that some of you have been in my trauma-informed talks in the past. There's going to be a little bit of that, but I'm just going to tell you, basically, I'm going to talk about the experience of COVID-19 and the trauma that we've gone through, and just kind of review how traumatic events impact behavior. And then I'm going to take you through my own experiences of dealing with incredible uncertainty, which, Elizabeth, if you're still here, this will draw heavily on our experiences together. So be ready to relive that. But I'm going to give you some suggestions based on what I have learned about coping with uncertainty with my own experience. So here we go. Let's do this. So first of all, just to remind you, if we want to define trauma, trauma is an event that is physically or emotionally harmful. Oh, hold on, I can't even read my whole definition because I've got the group chat in the corner. Because the individual perceives his life or the life of someone he loves as threatened. And I think we can all relate to that right now. I mean, that absolutely fits what we're going through right now. Our lives are threatened, our livelihoods are threatened, and the people that we love have also experienced that. Here are some things that I identified as potential trauma that is a result of the impact of COVID-19. Displacement from workplace or classroom. So just kind of losing that place where you felt like I'm always going there, like I know I'm going to be there. You're no longer going there. And with that comes disruption of your routine. How many of you have had routines that have changed since you were sent home from work, or since COVID-19 became quite serious? I definitely have. Then there's separation from friends and family. I mean, for me, I feel quite happy that I'm here with my husband. We actually get along, and he can be annoying sometimes too, of course. Me, never, but him, yes. But generally, we get along great. But I'm still separate from friends, and my family, most of my family is in Chicago, or they're in the UK. My husband's family's in the UK. I have no idea when I'm going to see them again. I really, really don't, because, my parents are in their 70s. So, and my dad, I think, is definitely in that vulnerable group. So, I've thought about driving there, but if I drive, I can't do it in a day. I've thought about flying, but then I'm flying. So no matter what I do, I'm going to put them at risk. And then the same goes with the UK. And now there's the quarantine, however that's supposed to work. So that's kind of hard. I really don't know when I'm going to see them again. And with that, of course, comes isolation. For some people, there's also an increase in domestic violence. If you're living with someone who's actually an abuser, your situation could be much, much worse. And then, of course, there's the trauma that comes from coping with a serious illness. Now, for some people who are affected by COVID-19, they'll be fine. They won't even have any symptoms, or it'll just be a bad cold. But of course, other people are hospitalized and die, and then you're coping with that. That is a lot to cope with while economic and global uncertainty continues. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know what the economic fallout of this situation can be. And then there's the issue of being part of a marginalized group. Joe, who was on earlier, mentioned the fact that there is discrimination happening towards COVID or related to COVID-19. I wish she was on this so I could know more about it. But one of the big things that I think has inspired the protests we've seen is, Black people in the United States are overwhelmingly victims of violence, but also they have been really disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So there is a lot of trauma and pain that is happening just as the result of the impact of COVID-19. The truth is, though, we all experience trauma, and because we're all different, we all experience things in a different way. So some people may actually be fine. It was really interesting too with me. When our school was closed, I was teaching a class at USC, undergraduate engineers. They all went home. A couple of them were international, most of them were domestic, but living all over the United States, and their experiences really varied. Some people were absolutely fine. Like, they went home, their home life was actually pretty stable, it was all good. Other people, I had a student, probably one of my, possibly the best student in my class up until our classes went online. She went home, her mother was hospitalized for COVID, then her family was quarantined. She had serious problems accessing the internet, and needless to say, her performance in the class went straight down. I had another student who's an immigrant from India, entrepreneur with a really successful music business, or was becoming quite successful, just about to graduate and planning on staying in the United States and really trying to build his business throughout the summer. I think he was doing stuff with music festivals. Well, that all disappeared. And not only did it disappear, but he was all by himself here. We had a one-to-one near the end of the semester, and he said, I'm having a really hard time because I'm here by myself. So we all experience trauma, and we all experience it in different ways. So now I want to just remind you or tell you about some reactions to trauma. They can broadly be identified as fight, flight, or freeze. So fight is argumentative behavior, rudeness, outbursts, reluctance to or resistance to work, either in the classroom or in the workplace, or different directives that people give you. Flight usually ends up being absenteeism or punctuality issues, or maybe the individual seems like they're not totally there. And freeze is just like complete disengagement or limited participation or minimal participation. So I'm going to ask you, do you I definitely recognize I'm definitely flight. Like, I am absolutely flight. When things were getting really bad with COVID, I was like, oh my God, should I go to my parents' house? Should we go to my parents' house? Should I go to Canada? Maybe we should go to Canada. Maybe we should go to the UK. And Rob was like, what are you talking about? We're going to stay here and we're going to fight it out. And he was like, we're going to stay here and we're going to fight it out, because he's a fighter. So he's like yelling at the television, ranting about all this stuff. You can probably recognize your own trauma behavior here. If you felt like you wanted to run away from it all, welcome to the Flight Club. Right. So how can we help each other cope? There are things we can do to help each other. So recovery from trauma is 100% possible. And again, these are some broad stages of trauma recovery. The first is safety and stabilization. So feeling safe. remembrance and mourning. So thinking about what happened, remembering what happened, and allowing yourself to mourn for what has been lost or who has been lost. And then reconnection and reintegrating. So I find it really interesting that Caroline earlier said that she feels like we're moving to a what now stage, which tells me that hopefully we might even be moving, at least in some people might be moving through these stages now, which is a good thing, actually. So what we can do is we can create spaces that encourage healing from trauma. So once trauma occurs, you know, its effects cannot be erased. You're never going to go back to before the trauma. There's always an after. Like the after, that's it. So you can't erase those effects, but the effects are not necessarily destiny, and they don't necessarily have to be bad. It is possible to mitigate the impacts of trauma. So a question to ask yourself is, as educators and administrators, how can we create spaces that encourage healing for trauma impacted individuals? I'm going to just give you some suggestions of things you can do. So one is to refrain from judgmental language, which I think sometimes is easier said than done. But if you are having some difficulties with someone you work with or someone that you're teaching, consider it through the lens of being impacted by trauma. And when you try and speak to them, rather than saying something like, you're never coming to class, you're always late, you seem so lazy, you know, something like that. I mean, personally, a word like lazy, I said this to a friend yesterday, I feel like lazy students should be banned from people's vocabulary, because that's like never, ever the problem. It's never the problem. If a student is not doing the work, there's always a reason for it. So instead, ask open-ended questions like, you know, I noticed that you haven't been coming to class lately. What's going on? Is there anything I can do to help you? That's often I will say that. Is there anything I can do to help you? So I'm reframing it so that we can be a partner in this situation rather than, you did this wrong. Also, I think if you're in an administrative role, if you haven't already done this, and maybe even if you have, really reconsider old policies. There are so many policies that I think just don't work right now because our world has really changed. So why enforce them? I mean, obviously, if you're managing a school, sometimes you have some legal things that you really cannot change. But in lots of cases, you can reconsider some policies that no longer work and maybe should just go anyway. I think, again, this is another easier said than done, but really important. Stay calm in your interactions with someone, even if you feel like they're being aggressive or they're acting out or you are personally frustrated with them. Maybe take some time before you do interact with them so you can calm yourself, and be flexible. Be flexible with students. Be flexible with staff. Be flexible with yourself. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to have done it perfectly. You don't have to have had a great lesson today. You don't have to have finished everything on your to-do list. Be flexible. Be forgiving, maybe, of yourself and others. So here are some other things you can do, especially if you're a teacher or an administrator. Help people know what to expect. Create predictable workplace routines and school routines. We are having class at this time. I will be there. We will do this then. If you need to vary from the routine, let people know about it in advance. Those routines create stability, which creates a sense of safety for people. So when you veer from them, you may really discombobulate them. They might be fine or they might not. So again, if you are doing these things, you're actually going to benefit everyone anyway. So just try and do it. establish communication channels that people can easily access if and when necessary. I think this is very important because what it does is it allows the people who need help to see that you are approachable, and then they can approach you when they need some assistance from you, and then you can either help them or ideally direct them to someone who can. And also, if you're managing a team, communicate what you know and what you don't know to your team. A few years ago, I read a really fantastic book called Managing Transitions. It's all about change in the workplace. And one of the things that the authors found was that when there's a period of great change, which is what we're in right now, people really need that information. They really need to know what's going on. So if you are in an administrative role of any kind and you have some employees, or if you are a teacher and your students need information, just check in with them and tell them, like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what they're thinking right now. I don't know how this is going to happen, but they said they're going to tell us in a week. That really does help establish that feeling of stability and that someone's listening to me, and it lessens that feeling of uncertainty. But remember, you have to take care of yourself. Okay, that cliche about putting your oxygen mask on first is so true. You really cannot help other people if you are not taking care of yourselves. And I think those of us who are educators, we want to help. That's great, but the person we need to help first is definitely ourselves. So number one, be aware that dealing with issues related to other people's trauma can cause re-traumatization or vicarious traumatization. So if you are working with a group of people who have been impacted by trauma and you're hearing their stories, it can traumatize you. So just be aware that that can happen. And some typical signs of that are compassion fatigue and burnout. How does that manifest? Well, if someone's telling you a story that's actually quite traumatic, and you are not feeling anything, I would ask yourself what's going on. Maybe I need to step back. Compassion fatigue is usually when you feel like you're not caring about these things. And this is, I think, really huge. Remember, you can play a role in creating spaces that are conducive from trauma, but healing other people's trauma is not your responsibility. You are not responsible for healing someone else from trauma. It's really ultimately their responsibility. You can do things to help them, but it is their responsibility to, I think Caroline said this earlier, to walk through the door. You can show them where the door is and help guide them, but they have to walk through it. And definitely 100% give yourself time for self-care. Take time away from work and consider ways in which you can be supported, which kind of brings me to the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is coping with uncertainty. I really like this quote. Change is an event, but the transition is the process that you go through in response to the change. So change is like that, but the process is the thing that takes time. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own story and what happened to me, which I think really impacted me and my view on a lot of these things. As some of you know, I worked for a company for about 3 or 4 years, and I was promoted, and I moved from Santa Monica to San Jose to take this promotion, and it was like a partnership with a big university there, and almost as soon as I got there, everything really started to fall apart. The person who was my counterpart with the university was a new person who really wanted to basically get rid of us and run everything himself. And there was a lot of conflict between my organization and his organization, and it was really horrible, I would say. There was probably a period from about July of 2018, all the way into probably May of last year, where I was completely uncertain about what was going to happen with my job, where I was going to live, what I was going to do next. And it was super, super stressful. And I don't recommend it. It kind of, I feel like the peak was when we found out that they were getting rid of us the day before Thanksgiving, which was just lovely. Anyway, I learned a lot. It was a horrible experience, but I learned a lot. And so I would like to share with you a little bit about what I learned about that time. So first of all, accept reality. Like, just, I feel like a lot of our stress and anxiety and pain comes from our refusal to accept reality. And this actually works both ways. Okay. So there's obviously denial. Everybody knows like denial is a thing and you don't want to admit things are as bad as they are, but it's not just denial. It's also imagining the totally worst case scenario, which hasn't happened yet and may never, ever happen. So when you feel like everything is completely uncertain and, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen, just like stop and look around you. And I'm telling you, you will probably find that everything right at that moment is 100% fine and you're good. You are just not living in reality at that moment that you're freaking out. So actually the story that, or when I found out that our partnership was going to be dissolved and I had no idea what was going to happen, that was the day before Thanksgiving, I found out while I was out getting lunch for my team. It was like a pre-Thanksgiving lunch. And I was obviously quite upset, but I told myself, you know what? I'm just going to focus on this nice lunch with my team and our students. And that's what I did. And it was actually really, really nice. And then later I had to tell my poor assistant, who I think is my poor assistant, my deputy, who's on this call right now, I hope, Elizabeth. I had to tell her later in the day, and she had no idea, which was great because that meant I was able to really live in that moment. But just try and accept reality. Another thing that I would recommend is just giving up external control. You cannot control other people. You can't control what's happening outside your house right now, outside your door in other countries. You can't. We all want to, but you can't. You can only control yourself. So maintain internal control. Think about, you can control your reactions to things. You can take some time to cry. You can take some time to breathe and be by yourself. You can always control yourself. You just can't control the world outside you. And then I know this is maybe hard sometimes, but cultivate gratitude, because even in the worst moments, there is usually something to be grateful for. I think obviously that's harder sometimes than others, but I find if you try, that does really help. It helps ground you and get through the really difficult moments, to think about the things you actually are grateful for. Another thing I would suggest is take one moment at a time. You don't need to know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't need to know what's going to happen in 6 months. You really don't. Just do like one thing. Like just do one, whatever that is. Okay. Like maybe it's getting out of bed. Okay. That's fine. Maybe it's sending off one resume. Maybe it's responding to one email. Who knows what it is, but just take one moment at a time. Make the most of your shifting landscape. As I have said a couple times, I think today and earlier, the uncertainty is really scary. And we don't know what's going to happen. And what happens could be things we don't like. But there is a huge opportunity when things are shifting to remake things the way you would like them to be. That's when you have those opportunities. A lot of times institutions are just too stuck in their ways to change. But when there is a lot of uncertainty, that is when you can make some really good lasting change. So make the most of it. I mean, for me, when all of that happened, I decided that that I wanted to live in either San Francisco, San Diego, or Los Angeles. I started sending out my resumes, and then I took the chance. I felt kind of excited about a job opportunity at USC, and I did it. So I moved back, ironically, to the town I left. But I just made the most of that shifting landscape, I feel. And here's a really interesting one. Expand your view. So like you want to make your view kind of minute, but also really outsized. If you think about everything that's going on with you right now, but then you expand it out to the entirety of your life and what might come after, then you know that this is actually temporary and you can deal with it because you've dealt with every single other thing that's happened in your life. And one day you'll just be like, wow, that was bad, or that was interesting, and it'll be over. So expand your view that this moment is in fact just a moment. Find and use your support system is huge. First of all, Amy, I would like to give a massive, massive shout out to Amy, because when I was going through this, I called her crying so many times. And I'm going to give a huge shout out to Melanie Johnson, my mom, because that woman probably listened to me cry on the phone to her every single day for like 6 months. And then I moved to Santa Monica again, and I was happy. And she was like, oh, I guess I'm never going to hear from you again. Not true. It's just I really needed her there. And also Rob, so my husband. So we all have people like that who are really there for us when we need them. Use them. They want to be used by you in that way. They care about you. They love you. They'll do it for you. And you can do it for them when you're in a better spot. And then finally, find and make use of your healthy de-stressors, whatever that is. Going for a walk, writing. I'm a big journaling fan. I do a lot of journaling. I also really like walks. I've recently gotten into yoga and stuff. I'm going like full Californian. But whatever works for you as a de-stressor, do it. If it's healthy. If it's unhealthy, I would look at it, but you know, hey, we've all been there too. And remember, this too shall pass. Literally the one thing you can rely on in life is that things will change. They will definitely change. So whatever you're going through right now is 100% not going to be forever. And that is it. Thank you so much. That is the end of my talk. I am going to stop sharing the screen. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Is anyone still here? I feel like it's just
yeah. We have folks here.
Oh, I see some people. Yay. Does anyone have any thing they want to add or share or ask?
I will second some of the comments you made with that podcast, staying in with Camille and Emily. They do make a really good point about this pressure that we put on ourselves to feel like I should be doing more things around the house. I should be cleaning out my closet. I should be whatever your should be's are. And that we feel like we should be taking on these extra activities or pressures because of the shelter in place. And so it's really important to recognize that no, not everything needs to be done right now. It actually can wait. So I know that that's one really difficult thing for all of us, because I think we're all pretty excited about our professions and about students and about teaching and about business. So it can be easy to pile on the projects, but give yourself a break. And thank you, Melanie.
You're welcome. Any other thoughts, questions?
Thanks, Mel. I really appreciate your talk, especially anytime that mental health and education overlap. I think we need more of that in the classroom. And you started out by sort of asking about triumphs and challenges, and you know, the challenges are quite apparent, of course. And I just thought I'd like add one positive or potentially positive side of all of this for our field, specifically language teaching, I see is a move toward online. Of course, it may not be ideal, and meeting in person and human interaction, there's no replacement, absolutely. But in the past, and especially the past 5 years or so, I've noticed that our field has sort of taken the stance that like you can't teach language online. If you look for online ESL teaching jobs, you won't find many of them. I mean, not in a university context. You find online teaching in other academic disciplines like English or education or everything. But for language teachers, I've always, been told like, well, for language teaching, you need to be there in person. And so I'm kind of excited about how this will change our field. Of course, I want to get back into the classroom as well, but I do see opportunities for more online work, and I know that's just one small positive thing in the midst of a giant, huge mess. Just a thought that I've been thinking about more lately. Thank you so much, Mel.
You're welcome. I totally agree with you, Anne, because I don't know, I always feel like ELT is like a little behind the times. Like I always think back to when I had my very first lesson. Like we had a tape recorder. Like we had a big old-fashioned tape recorder in 2002. Like, I mean, to me, that's just like a metaphor for the entire industry. Is like we're always like 10 years behind. And so even though this is an incredibly difficult time, and I really feel it's like exploded or blown up our industry, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Now, that said, I like teaching online, and not everybody does. And that goes for teachers and students. Some students really hate it, and some teachers really hate it. So I feel like it's not for everyone, but I also think giving students more options for how they can learn best is a good thing. And also for teachers to deliver content in a way that they feel more comfortable or they prefer doing is a good thing.
Yeah. Hi. Oh, hi.
Hello.
It's Jo. I just wanted to say, I really loved, I loved your talk. I missed a few, so I just came in there to yours towards sort of the middle. But anyway, it was great. I just wanted to say, really the same, like in terms of, like we're all in the same boat, like, is it Anne who just spoke then? Yeah. I mean, it was great what she said, because it is quite scary, having to adapt and having to change to the new sort of way of life, and our industry being, I don't know if threat is the right word, but certainly it can feel a bit like that, Yeah. And then, but we're all managing, we've all managed to cope and get through it. And actually there's so many positive things, like you just said, and some people don't like it. I've certainly spoken to quite a lot of people who are like, oh no, this is so hard. But actually, there are so many ways to see the benefits, and especially I think for students, certainly my experience so far has been really positive, doing tutorials and classes online. So hopefully there is, there's a really big way forward for us all actually, and we can work through it, and who knows where we'll all be in the next 5 years, with this.
Yeah,
it's quite exciting in some ways, Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say, and thank you again.
Well, thanks guys. Thank you so much. Huge thank you to everybody in the UK and Ireland who've actually maybe been a part of this day longer than I have, since I was asleep for the first couple of sessions. I really appreciate you staying up late, having a cocktail and some English language professional development. It was awesome. I've been so inspired by today. Like, get ready for me to hit you up and be like, oh, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we do that? Let's do this. And just thank you so much. If you, one last plug, if you haven't donated anything and you still want to or can, please make sure you do. You can go over to our page and you'll see all the links we've got there for that. So bye, everyone. Amy, is there anything you want to say?
Nope. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.